SM50. SM50.
Mark, ready? I don't have my gavel, so I'll do the best that I can. Welcome to the Stormont Vale Event Center Exhibition Hall, the location for the JEDO meeting tonight. There we go. Now, got our mics on. Again, welcome to the JEDO meeting for September the 9th, 2020. Thank you for all that are gathered here today for the exhibition hall. If we could start with our first item.
Item 2, roll call. Commissioner Rippon. Commissioner Cook.
Present.
Commissioner Mays.
Here.
Mayor de la Isla.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Emerson.
Here.
Councilmember Padilla.
Here.
Councilmember Lesser. Councilmember Hiller. Councilmember Valdivia Apala. Councilmember Ortiz. Councilmember Nager. Councilmember Dobler. Councilmember Duncan.
I would note that we do have a quorum present. Our next item, please.
Item 3A, approval of May 13th, 2020 JEDO board meeting minutes.
They are attached in the packet. I don't know if everyone has seen the items and the ability to read over them. If there are any questions.
Motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve
Second.
by Mayor, second by Commissioner Mays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That item is approved. Our next item.
Item 3B, approval of Project Oyster incentive agreement.
Item 3B is in your packet, and this is an action item. And so, Barbara, I'll turn it over to you to tell us about Project Oyster.
Thank you very much. With our business retention and expansion programs, we serve as a liaison and primary resource for existing businesses in the community, making sure the needs of our major employers are met and their future plans for local organizations can continue to grow and expand. We have 4 projects this evening to share with you. At the December 11th, 2019 JEDO meeting, the approval of Project Oyster's funding occurred, with a total approved incentive of $96,000 based upon their capital investment of $3.5 million and their addition of 17 new jobs, with an average wage of $43,000 annually plus benefits over the next 5 years. This investment will result in an economic impact of $69 million over 10 years and a 713% return on investment. All incentives approved are performance-based to be paid out as earned. With your approval of the contract agreement in your packet this evening, we're excited to announce that Project Oyster is Midwestern Metal's custom dredge works. I'd like to invite John Jones, president of the organization, to address and share comments related to the project and their growth and success in our community. John?
Hi, guys. So what we're doing is, I don't know if you really know what we do for sure. We build mining equipment for sand and gravel production or for contract dredging. Our existing facility is too small to handle the scale of our projects. We've grown from just a little tiny deal to now something that's much more substantial, and we need to increase our painting, blasting, assembly facility. And so to do that, we began a project where we're going to build 5 new buildings, a complete building for paint, a complete building for blast, and a complete building for just assembly, as well as some machining and other stuff. With that, we're super excited to have you guys' commitment to us and for us to be able to lay our anchor, so to speak, here. This means a big deal. It's a really big deal to us. So we want to thank everybody for that, and just super excited to get the project going. Everybody? questions or anything?
Are there any questions for John or comments about the project or for Barbara? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve Project
So moved.
Glacier? There's a motion by Mayor Della Isla. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Padilla. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. As is custom at this time, we're going to take a quick break to take a picture with John to congratulate him on the approval of his project. We will take a brief 5-minute recess.
I was gonna say we could move down one. I couldn't pull it off.
Oh, great. All right. Make sure our sound's back on. We're back? Okay. Our next item.
Item 3C, approval of Project Prince Incentive Agreement.
Barbara, if you want to describe Project Prince for us.
Thank you. At the February 12th, 2020 JEDO meeting, the approval of Project Prince's funding occurred with a total approved incentive of $341,000 based upon a capital investment of $31.4 million, along with an additional 33 new jobs over the next 5 years, with average wages of $56,000 annually plus benefits. This investment will result in a $495 million economic impact over 10 years and provides a 504% return on investment with a payback period of less than 1 year. The incentives are performance-based, to be paid out as earned, and details are outlined in the contract agreement in your packet. With the approval of the agreement this evening, we're very pleased to announce that Project Prince is Hill's Pet Nutrition. While he can't join us this evening, I'd like to virtually introduce you to Corey Murray, the plant director, to address and share comments related to the project and their growth and success in our community in this video.
Hi, I'm Corey Murray, Plant Director at the Hills Pet Nutrition Plant here in Topeka. I'm delighted to be here virtually today to introduce you to the Hills organization and to thank JEDO and Go Topeka for their support in our expanding capacity. Our history in Topeka dates back to the late 1930s when Dr. Mark Morris Sr. and his wife developed a new pet food to remedy an illness that they believed was a result of poor nutrition. This diet, now known as Hill's Prescription Diet KD, is still being sold today and is developed for dogs with renal failure. In 1948, Dr. Morris contracted with Burton Hill of the Hills Packaging Company for canning of this innovative food and subsequently licensed Hills to produce his pet food formulas. In the following years, the partnership between Dr. Morse and the Hill Packaging Company evolved into Hill's Pet Nutrition, and it continued to grow and add formulas of therapeutic food to its prescription line of products. Dr. Morse established a research laboratory in Topeka in 1951 when 4 prescription diet pet foods were available. Today, the Hills Topeka plant produces over 200 million pounds of prescription and science diet, a number that continues to grow. These product offerings serve both canine and feline companion animals. This growth is what is driving the capacity expansion within our plant. Over the next several years, we will be making a significant investment in the Topeka site. Phase 1 of this plan includes a $31 million investment that consists of a new on-site wastewater treatment facility, followed by a new diet making system, commonly referred to as Stu-Cell 2. In order to support this new equipment, we are hiring an additional 33 employees that we will bring on board with an extensive training program. Again, I'd like to thank JEDO and Go Topeka for their support.
Great. Are there any questions that anybody would have for Barbara regarding this agreement? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
There's a motion to approve by Commissioner Rippon, second by Mayor Della Isla. We could have a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimous. Great.
Thank
Two
you
great
from Corey and
announcements.
Hills Pet Nutrition.
All right, Barbara, you're on a roll. What's our next item?
Well, our next item is Project Vita.
Oh, if we
Do
can
you
let
need to announce it?
Yep.
Yes, sorry. Item 3D, approval of incentive funding for Project Vita.
Project Vita is a life sciences company looking to expand in our community. They will be investing $1.5 million in facility improvement expenditures and equipment purchases. Over the next 5 years, they'll also be adding 7 new jobs with an average wage of $85,000 annually plus benefits. On August the 20th, our Go Topeka Board and Executive Committee approved this incentive, and we're presenting it to you this evening for JEDO's approval. We're proposing up to $76,500 in incentives, and all of those incentives are performance-based to be paid out as earned. With your approval of the funding this evening, the details of the agreement will be outlined via formal contract and presented for your approval at a future meeting.
Are there any questions anyone would have for Barbara regarding Project Vita? Seeing none, the pleasure of the board.
I'll move to approve.
Move a motion for approval by Commissioner Mays. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Della Isla. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimous. Our next item, Madam Clerk.
Item 3E, approval of incentive funding for Project Vertical.
I'd also like to present Project Vertical to you, a manufacturing company looking to expand in our community. They'll be investing $6.6 million in building equipment and facility improvement expenditures over the next 5 years, and they'll also be adding up to 40 new jobs with an average wage of $43,000 annually plus benefits. On September 1st, the Go Topeka Board approved this potential funding incentive, and we're presenting it to you this evening for the same. We're proposing up to $234,000 in incentives, and all of those incentives are performance-based to be paid out as earned. With your approval of the funding this evening, the details of this agreement will also be outlined via formal contract and presented for your approval at a future meeting. As you can see, business retention and expansion, we have a lot of growth that's occurring in the community. So these two, of course, are the funding approval, and the earlier two were the agreement approvals.
Any questions regarding Project Vertical? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion made by Mayor Della Isla. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Padilla. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, show that it passes unanimous. Madam Clerk, our next item.
Item 3F, approval of Go Topeka audit.
Good evening. Tonight we have the Go Topeka audit for you for 2018 and 2019, and I would introduce Morgan Paget from BT & Co., and she will present that audit report for you.
All right, great. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I am Morgan Paget, a director with BT & Co. And as Natalie mentioned, we do have for you the audit report for Go Topeka for 2019. And it also shows 2018 as well, which you did see last year. So it's in your packet. Just want to make a couple of comments about it, starting with the financial statements. These are consolidated, so it includes Go Topeka and then the East Topeka Learning Center Support Corp, which Go Topeka owns. And so it includes both of those organizations. We did give a clean, unmodified audit opinion, which means that the statements are materially correct in accordance with the accounting standards. I'll also mention that the statements are the statements that you have here on a full accrual basis. Go Topeka previously used to report on a modified cash, so these are in a different type of accounting, and these are going to show full liabilities and assets, those sorts of things. For 2019, Go Topeka ended with just a little more than $29 million in assets, $22.2 million in liabilities, and then $6.9 million in net assets or equity. They've got, for 2019, total revenue was just a little bit shy of $5.7 million. Most of that, of course, is in funding from this organization in the form of the grant. And under the accrual basis, I'll just explain, that revenue is recorded when those funds are expended, not when they're received. So you won't see the flat $5 million in there in revenue. There's actually just about $4.8 million for 2019 that they did spend on economic development activities. Total expenses were $6.2 million, so they ended the year with an actual decrease in net assets or a net loss of $519,000, again, on an accrual basis. Let's go forward here a little bit. There's also some additional detail information on the breakdown of expenses. So expenses were $6.2 million, 4.7 of that was on economic development. Then $723,000 was spent at the East Topeka Learning Center program, and then the rest of $786 million is general and administrative costs for Go Topeka. Cash flow for 2019, again, different than net income. They actually had a net decrease in cash for the year of $3.4 million. $1.8 million of that was from just day-to-day operations, use that amount, payment of incentives, those sorts of things. And then they had a negative outflow for investing activities of $1.5 million. Most of that is finishing of the Learning Center and the capital expenditures made for that. There's some accounting policies noted in here. Just want to mention a couple of things. There were some new accounting standards that were required to be implemented for them and related to revenue. Did not change the way or timing of revenue recognition, but just some additional disclosures. And those are noted they're included in the footnotes. You'll see some additional language if you compare them to prior year about how revenue is recognized and things like that. Let's step forward here a little bit. They do have $6.1 million in what they're calling investments. 2.3 of that is in certificates of deposit, and the rest is then in other fair value investments. Most of that sitting in a money market fund with really no difference between fair value and what its carrying value is. The rest of the small amounts are in treasury bills and treasury notes. There's some information about some restricted cash. So they do hold some cash that's restricted for two purposes. One's an amount for Mars that is in escrow for Mars to be used to draw down. They have actually earned that entire amount. That's $1.4 million. And then there's 3.5 sitting in escrow as required by the loan that East Topeka Learning Center has. That's sitting in escrow as requirement of those loan funds. There is some debt for East Topeka Learning Center. It's $6.5 million shown net of some loan fees. That's interest only until 2027. So it's sitting at its full principal value right now on the balance sheet, and they're making interest payments. The actual maturity date of it, the entire thing, is 2053. Lots of information about related party transactions. Obviously, Go Topeka is a member of the Greater Topeka Partnership, and so that's a related party. So we talk a lot about the relationship and the transactions that go on between GTP and Go Topeka. At the end of the year, Go Topeka owed GTP for $151,000. That is purely for reimbursements that Go makes to expenses that GTP pays on their behalf. Employees that are GTP that are really solely in Go functions, those sorts of things. Those are amounts that were owed at the end of the year. Go also received $407,000 from GTP, and that is support that they get from the partnership and also to cover expenses that are paid with private dollars. And then Go Topeka also leases, or obviously shares office space with GTP, and they pay a share of the lease payments on those for about $57,000 for their share of the space. Of course, they've got the JEDO grant. There is some unspent funds, and those are shown as a liability on the balance sheet. And $1,380,000 of that in 2019 is set aside for the Minority and Women-Owned Business Program as required. There's also some information in here about various incentives. They've got outstanding $3.4 million of contingent incentives. Those have not been earned yet, but if those employers earn all of those incentives, they'll be paid out as outlined here in the next 5 years to a total of $3.4 million. And the only liability that's recorded for incentives is $1.4 million, and that is Mars. Those are amounts they have fully earned, and they are all sitting in escrow for just Mars to draw down as they decide to. One last note I'll mention is the subsequent events footnote. I hardly ever mention this one, but a crazy thing happened in March of 2020, and here we are, all 6 feet spaced apart. So it just talks about the pandemic and the impact that it does have. It's not known yet what the impact will be on the organization, but it's likely that there will be one, and so that footnote just mentions the pandemic and that there could be a impact financially to the organization. And then the last couple of pages just talk about, that gives some information about the individual statements for Go and the Learning Center independently. The other document you have, and I'm just going to mention it briefly, is a report to the Audit Committee. And these are all required communications that we have to make to the governing body of Go Topeka. You've been provided a copy of it. And really I'm just going to summarize it for you. The first couple of pages are all just some standard communications we have to make. What you should know is that we didn't have any issues working with Go Topeka, no disagreements on any accounting or auditing matters, so that's positive. There's also a letter communicating one deficiency in internal control that we noted, and that letter is in there. And then you've also been provided a copy of the representation letter we've gotten from Go Topeka that just affirms in writing all the things they've told us during the course of the audit. They give it to us in writing again at the end and sign it, and that also includes the couple of audit adjustments that we did make to Go Topeka's to trial balance to get to these audited numbers. So, are there any questions I can answer?
Morgan, can we talk a moment about the deficiency
Yes.
that's noted, and maybe go into that a little bit further, since that is an item that needs to be noted whenever we do an audit?
Okay, yep. Yeah, we've got a report. When we do an audit, we look at the internal controls of an organization purely to plan our audit, to know where the risks may be and where the controls may be weakened that we want to focus on. And so we don't really give an opinion on controls, but if we find deficiencies, we do report them. And we do have one that is reported, and it is all around segregation of duties. You may be aware that there are ideal situations so that one person doesn't have access to or doesn't process a transaction from start to finish. And we noted that there is not a complete segregation of duties in certain areas, purely based on the small size of the staff. And I know they're taking steps to rectify that. This is the first year we've had this finding, and it's important to note that. Previously, they used to use an outsourced CPA accounting firm to help with their accounting, and that provided that extra layer of kind of third-party verification. That ended at the end of 2018, and so, and then there were some struggles in staffing and those sorts of things. So it didn't have a complete segregation of duties. Mostly around cash disbursements is the biggest piece of it. So we talked with the executive committee about ways they can improve that and things they can implement, and they have already taken steps to add another person to their accounting staff to kind of help with those things. And so I think that will be resolved going forward.
So is it your understanding that as the auditor, and again, you are just the auditor, that this is an issue that did not occur in 2018?
Correct.
For the audit report and should not appear in the 2020 audit report?
That is definitely was not an issue in 2018, and I do not expect it to be one in the 2020 audit, yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board regarding the audit? Here?
I can't hear her, yeah.
That's right.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
There it is.
I just wanted to say thank you to Natalie for all the work that she's done. She's taken this organization from a modified cash basis to accrual.
Yep.
And for anybody that has the experience in doing these things, it is a hairy process. especially for an organization with as many cost centers as this one is. So Natalie, thank you. Congratulations. This is absolute display of how wonderful you're working in this organization. Thank you.
Any other comments? Warren, thank you very much for all
Thank
of your
you.
hard work.
All right.
And thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the Go Topeka audit? Motion made by Councilmember Emerson, second by Mayor Della Isla. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes. Our next item.
Item 3G, approval of incubator project in partnership with Topeka Housing Authority.
Good afternoon, good evening. In 19 is so far away. In 2019, we embarked upon a relationship with the Housing Authority, the Topeka Housing Authority. What we wanted to do was take some residents from that community and look at upskilling them and helping them start their business. So we did a focus group to take a look at who was interested. We had initially about 20-something interested in starting a business, and those that rose to the top was ended up being 5 individuals ready to go through the program and start a business. So we took them through what we call our fast track program, and that program gave them some basic education on how to start a business. We also assigned them to 2 business coaches, one to help them with the systems and the second one to help them with writing the business plan and getting everything in order. So by this time, it's the beginning of 2020. Our goal was by May of this year to have them in business and to have them up and operating. We identified 5 individuals, a daycare, bakery, a drywall contractor, someone to do photography, and the other was a kids fun zone. And so those were all needed commodities in that community, and so what they decided to do was come along for the ride. Well, little did we all know that the ride was going to stop, and it did. It stopped right as they were getting ready to open their business. And so the business coaches, while we were not prepared to move this project forward at that time, the business coaches remained by their side and they continued to support them and continued to provide training. The next step was also getting the facility ready for these businesses, because we're going to incubate them and march alongside them as they grew, help guide them to business opportunities, and help market them throughout the community. Well, we were creating the relationship with the Housing Authority. They gave us the old Aquaponics Center to, and I know you all have heard this before, but they gave us the old Aquaponics Center to start this, what we call business incubator. And the Aquaponics Center is still waiting on us. It's their home. So we had to get some construction done. We had to help them with all of get their systems up and running. We had to help the small businesses do a number of things, but the pandemic just stopped everything. And so now we want to bring that back on board. We want to take a deeper look at it. The businesses are ready, willing, and able. They are still operating in the education mode, and they're ready to put their hands on operating their business. So we are requesting your approval because we want to continue this process. We want to create 5 new businesses in an area where there's definitely a need, with a population where there are little or no businesses starting at this moment. We want to create 5 new businesses. So we're asking for your approval of $250,000 that we talked to you about before, of carry forward revenue to help start these businesses, as we mentioned before. So the money is carry forward money that we already have that was assigned to MWBD at the time, and we didn't use it, and it just rolled over. So I'm asking for your assistance in helping me help start these businesses.
Linda, tell me a little bit about these 5 businesses that we had ready to go before the pandemic hit. Have they started their business? Are they just still on hold? What are these business owners wanting to do?
They're still on hold because the promise was that we were going to be sort of the catalyst to help them start that business. So they are still meeting with their business coaches, having the conversation. They're going out getting licenses. They're doing some of the things that we were supposed to have done already. But, you know, COVID stopped everything and everybody. And so we're all a little bit behind. We're all a little bit behind. But these businesses, I think they're worth the investment.
And as far as the Topeka Housing Authority goes, they are still willing to work with us in the aquaponics lab?
Yes, they are. They're responsible for all the utilities and all the exterior maintenance, interior maintenance, and we're responsible for getting the businesses set up in the facility.
Board have any questions? Motion to approve the carry, and again, these are carry forward funds left over that are being, again, used to bring forward for this project. Motion to approve by Councilmember Padilla, second by Commissioner Rippon. For any other discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes.
Thank you so much.
Madam Clerk, our next item.
Item 3H, approval of Choose Topeka Remote Initiative.
My back through. There we go. Thank you so much. So the Choose Topeka Talent Initiative, the Relocation Initiative, has been successful in so many ways since we announced it after the December JEDO board meeting. To date, over 3,800 resume and interest submissions have been received. And actually, as of late last week, we have had 22 candidates submitted to the program and a total of $126,250 encumbered of the $300,000 to be allocated. Employer Insights have shared with us that remote candidates would be an added benefit for employers and their interest and their support. Existing local employers recognize it's beneficial to them too, because trailing partners could continue to benefit and bring qualified candidates to the community that they could potentially hire in the future. We met with the Go Topeka Executive Committee and they approved and recommended allowing up to 40% of the existing currently allocated funds for the program to be used for a remote worker relocation option. Based upon a candidate's salary, we'd provide a tiered relocation incentive with the following items provided by the candidate prior to distribution. Still providing proof of prior residency, still providing their signed rental agreement or documentation that verifies their home purchase, that minimum one-year lease agreement that we talked about in the past, as well as proof of salary and benefits package. The three things that we've added with this remote relocation package, or that option part of it, is to limit one relocation incentive per household, that there is a minimum 3-month waiting period, and that the remote employer must be located outside of Shawnee County. Want to make sure that you are aware this request seeks to adjust and allocate potential funding that we already have for the year, and that we're essentially adding a remote worker relocation option with existing funding that we already have, but it by no way would impact the funds that are potentially available for the traditional program.
Barbara, with the Topeka Talent Relocation, now wanting to add this option, why are we wanting to change things so quickly? Started.
What we're seeing, and as things have changed, as we mentioned with the pandemic earlier this evening, we're seeing a shift in terms of the way workers work and where they want to be as it relates to their work. There's been a very strong interest and really desire for people to look at Topeka as a possibility for them, but some people are tied to workforce options that they have in other parts of the country. Yet their employers now are indicating that remote work is an option and that they are able to work wherever they would like to work from. So we're trying to open that possibility up. We have talked previously, and I wanted to share this on the next slide as well. We've talked about the economic impact as it relates to these dollars that we invest. For every $5,000 that we invest, we see a 10-time return on investment. You've seen, I don't know, it's kind of hard here. The screens are a little bit different with social distancing. But, and Freddie had shared this previously in terms of the economic impact of 100 new residents by yearly wages. And so even in the $30,000 to $40,000 area, you see that economic impact of between 2.9 and 3.8 million. For $40,000 to $50,000, you see between 3.5 and 4.3 million in economic impact. And then when you go 50 to 70,000 and up, you see an even greater economic impact in the community. So we're seeing that we have the potential to be able to use the funding that we've already encumbered and set aside to be able to be more creative with the relocation campaign and just flesh it out a little bit more.
What are the requirements on this relocation?
Those are the things mentioned on here as well. Those candidates would still have to provide their proof of prior residency, just like we require currently with the employer getting it from their candidate. They would still have to provide their signed rental agreement that shows it's a minimum of a 1-year lease agreement, or their documentation that verifies their home purchase for primary residence. They'd still have to provide a proof of salary and their benefits package from their employer to show that they are fully employed and to validate their salary information. And then, like I said, there's that limit so that you can't have multiple members of a household pool together and use the funds. There's one per household based upon that address. There's a minimum waiting period for us to be able to confirm that everything is the way that it needs to be. And it has to be for remote workers only. So we don't have, while we may have employers in Shawnee County that of course are recruiting people to come work here and using this campaign for that, they're not able to say, hey, yeah, you can come work for us and work remotely, and we're going to go this route as well as this route. So we made sure that we broke that apart.
Questions? Councilmember Emerson.
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Stapleton, just to, I believe I heard this, but I just want to verify this. You are not asking for more money for this program. You're simply asking for the option to spend up to 40% of the currently allocated funding. Is that correct?
That is correct. This request seeks to adjust and allocate potential funding that we already have for the year.
Thank you.
Member Padilla.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm just curious, Barbara, can you tell us 22 applicants, what kind of industry are they filling? What are the jobs that they're, what's attractive?
We see a mix, which is great. We, of course, see in manufacturing and in construction. We also see from financial services. We see them being recruited in healthcare, accounting, legal, trying to kind of run through all of that. We're seeing really that blend and kind of a breadth of it. Distribution logistics, information technology. We've got kind of just a broad spectrum of that. We also had forecast, and I mentioned the ROI that Freddie calculated for us previously. We were estimating that based on an average wage of $60,000 per year for the candidates that we have. Currently, the average wages that we're seeing among all the candidates that we received is closer to between $80,000 and $85,000 per year.
Thank you.
Other questions? Motion. Motion to approve by Councilmember Emerson, second by Councilmember Padilla. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Our next item.
Item 4, presentation 2021 budget.
Again. So as crazy as it sounds, we're starting the conversation of the 2021 budget. Seems like just a few weeks ago we were presenting the 2020 budget. Nevertheless, here we are. So first, I wanted to give you just a quick overview of the budget process to remind you the process that we take and the milestones. So we're in September. Tonight, what you'll hear is a concept of the budget programs that will be in the 2021 budget when we bring it before December for the final vote. We don't have any numbers ready yet for this budget, so this is a conceptual discussion only. Over the next few months, we'll be working to pull those numbers together. And then in October, we'll be inviting you all to come and have one-on-one meetings with us to discuss the draft form of that budget. In those meetings, we ask for your feedback and your input that we can use to make our final budget presentations to you in December better. In December, we will bring the final budget before you vote. Before I turn it over to Molly to talk about the program side of the budget, I just want to give you a little bit of an input as to my input into the budget. So as the CFO of the partnership, Topeka, I handle the general and administration side of the budget. So all of the shared and necessary costs for the organization to operate, things like rent, utilities, office supplies, all of those, not down into the side of things. Service departments, such as our finance, our HR, our IT, our facilities, our marketing, all of those organizations amongst everyone. So I provide all of those inputs in, and the program directors provide the programming. That is the exciting part of the budget that I'm about. So unless there's any questions about the G&A section of the budget and what that entails, I'll turn it over to Molly so she can meat of the programming budget.
Just briefly, Natalie, as we've talked about the pandemic and its impact on how we do business, from your perspective, and again, with what you're doing with the budget, what are you doing differently? Anything? What do you see changing 2021 to 2020?
So the biggest impact we see is the private side of our budget, and understanding what that impact will drive, what our programming would look like on the private side. So the impact to go as not as hard as other. We are continuing to monitor the funding for the overall organization to allow go to provide that public-private partnership out there.
Questions for Thank you.
I don't know how exciting I'll make this, but I am going to walk through each of the departments and just hit on a few highlights that are focus areas for each of those departments that you will see reflected in the budget. And like Natalie said, as soon as we have numbers, I'll send out a note to all of the JEDO members to invite you all to sit down with us one-on-one and walk through each line item. Okay, so first off, business attraction. Normally this is one that looks pretty business, but because of the pandemic and the way that we like to market face-to-face and get out into the rest of the nation and get in front of companies that are grow, we may not be able to travel and meet with those companies. We're going to have to get creative, and we already have started to do that, but we'll have strong marketing strategies as well as working on more regional relationships and really tapping into the Kansas City market. We've seen a lot of awareness of Topeka recently with our successes. The Kansas City area brokers and site selectors are really starting to take notice and realize that we're a short hour down the road and want to come over and have a visit. So that'll be some low-hanging fruit to tap into for next year. We're also looking at talking with developers who have taken notice of what's going on in Topeka and really want to kind of be an extension of our team and help market the sites and buildings that we have here, and want to better understand the potential for incentives for companies that they're courting as well. Redevelopment opportunities continue to present themselves as we have depleted most of the land that we have marketed in the past. We're looking at opportunities for buildings and redevelopment of structures to create some infill opportunities. And then just, innovative experiences, looking at doing virtual tours and trying to be top of mind and get creative during face-to-face and non-in-person times. MWBD budget, a couple of the highlights here. Will continue the Wheelhouse program, and that's the program for existing businesses that are in growth mode. the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit in conjunction with workforce programs and the Procurement and Technical Assistance Center that we have had for the past few years. Also, Glenda is working on something that you may have heard about, and she mentioned at the State of the Community event, the Seat at the Table community initiative to really just bring awareness and kind of provide a partnership experience for our community to learn more about one another. And then continuing the housing partnership program that Glenda mentioned. Economic analysis is pretty standard, so we have a great asset in Freddie, and he does require some to do his magic. So really, everything is pretty standard, and we can expect what we have spent in the past to stay similar for next year with just subscription costs and access to data and resources that we tap into. Innovation budget, this is one that, it's newer, so it's still kind of growing, and we'll see some changes there, but I think everything that we'll be talking about within that budget is something that you are all well aware of with the Innovation Center and Innovation Campus that we are doing the study on right now. Scholarships for plug and play and startups, talking about ways to connect better with our entrepreneurial ecosystem through branding and communication, and then programming for local entrepreneurs. We're also not part of this program budget, but expect to have conversations with us around what types of incentives we may want to offer for startups and entrepreneurs that are coming out of plug and play, and then others that we're gaining access to the network. VRE is pretty standard as far as just a lot of the cost in that department is just program expenses around the administration of auditing the incentives that are approved by this body and going out and meeting with companies to make sure that they understand here to provide resources to them and tackle barriers for growth, and then a little bit of marketing to make sure that they know what we have. We also usually do some headquarters visits. That'll just be kind of up in the air, depending on what travel looks like for next year. Talent initiatives budget. Choose Topeka, we knew we would have money in the budget to market that program, whether this last amendment or option approved made it through or not. And so we're still seeing an interest across the country looking at coming to Topeka. So we'll still continue to market to that audience, whether there's an incentive tied to it or not. We'll have costs associated with that. Included the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. Obviously, that's as relevant as ever, and Glenda's partnering with Barbara on that and leading that initiative to the next level. The scholarships that you all have previously approved with Washburn Tech and Washburn Tech East will continue, and then partnerships with Camp Kindergarten and Discovery Kindergarten to look at our young talent and develop really from the cradle on up. That's just my highlights, so that'll get your mind going for future meetings, but I will stand for any questions if you have any.
Briefly, talk just a moment about the innovation budget, the plug and play scholarships, because I think the plug and play is this area that we're seeing such a great return of investment for our community. They just really unique and neat stuff for our community.
I could speak to it, but I'm sure Katrin will do it better justice, so I'm going to give her a second to make it to the podium.
And again, I know this is just the concepts, but again, as we talk about plug and play and the scholarships.
So we're thinking about creative ways to offers in front of the startups that will join us every 6 months and see if we can attract them. So one of the ideas that we had was extend the availability of offers for them for a longer period, so they can relationships here. So that's one of the areas. We call that scholarships. Have to think about if 6 months. Other incentives for studying practice.
So is the concept then, once the business is established, created, and plug and play, providing them the opportunity at the root that they become part of our community?
Exactly. I think that's the big value proposition of the plug and play program for.
Are there any other questions about the budget? Any? Thank you. Next item.
Item 5 is Go Topeka second quarter report.
Okay, so at the chair's suggestion, I am here to address the board with any questions about the information that you have in your packet. As always, we provide you a quarterly report that's pretty in-depth, and I think it's evidence tonight that we have not been slow in the way of work and efforts within the Go Topeka staff and our programs. So we're all here to answer any questions for you, but I did want to just kind of step back a minute and just highlight the programs or the projects that we did approve tonight. So that was right at about 100 new jobs and $45 million in capital investment. So again, we're at another JEDO meeting where we've got a handful of existing businesses that if it were a new business, this would be a decent sized new business, right? So I just want to make sure that we continue to celebrate those wins, and they continue to diversify our economy, and it's great to keep celebrating the growth of our existing businesses. But other than that, I would stand for any questions. The whole team is here to answer anything. I've seen something in the packet that you want to dive into.
As Molly indicated, with us being in a socially distant world, with our requirements and how we are set up, and just being in this facility, and we wanted to do a live meeting rather than going through our standard 45-minute presentation, JEDO is provided a standard report from Go Topeka. So if anybody does have any questions, second quarter.
I do have one thing to add. So I don't know if you noticed a new face in the audience. In the corner, we have Kelly Maydew, and she is the new executive director of Forge, our young professionals organization. So you'll hear from her at future. I didn't want to put her on the spot. She's been with us since August 10th, but now you know a face to go with name.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Our next item.
Item 5B, discussion workforce.
This was an item that we had carried over from our last meeting. Councilmember Padilla had wanted to bring forward a discussion about our workforce initiative and kind of where it was at, and it was in order for it to be properly on our agenda and giving notice to the public that we were discussing it, carried it over to today. I don't know if wants to start off the discussion about workforce transportation and where we're at, where we've come from, our present spot.
Yeah, I can kick it off. We did have the ability, executive committee last week, to have a pretty in-depth discussion with Kevin, the owner of Capital City Taxi, who provides the rides, and with Bob Nugent with Topeka Metro. So I know Bob is here tonight, but I don't know if Kevin has arrived. So it may be prudent to hear from his side as well. And then Barbara has some written statements from a couple of companies who have taken advantage of the program and weren't able to be here, but she did want to read those. So I don't know if you want to...
Before we begin, maybe Molly or Barbara, we can talk about kind of how the Workforce Transportation Initiative came about, and because it is two separate programs, our NOTO and our South Topeka and North Topeka initiatives, and kind of how they came about.
Yeah, so really it was an opportunity that came to Go Topeka by way of Topeka Metro a few years back. So the need for workforce transportation, specifically in the South Topeka workforce corridor, was brought to the attention of Go Topeka and JEDO. And the pilot was started to test out the need and the ridership to see if it could sustain a full bus route. So that's how SOTO began, as a 3-year phased project, to where by the third year, JEDO's funding would phase out. And so we did extend SODO into 2020 for an additional year, but by the end of 2020, SODO and NETO should both are slated to be finished. So we have carried out that pilot and have tested that ridership and have the data. Unfortunately, there is not enough ridership right now to support a full route. So we see that there's a need, and we know that there is a need, but the solution that we have tested in prior years is not one that we see future for in 21 and beyond. So we have had multiple conversations with Topeka Metro, Capital City Taxi, and a number of businesses. We've also surveyed the businesses and just to glean in any information that we can on what worked well, what didn't work well. And if I could speak for Kevin, he did let us know that his business model with Capital City Taxi is going to change as of January 2021. So they will not be providing that third shift coverage. And that is a large portion of the ridership that have taken advantage of this program within the manufacturing industry in both NETO and in SODO. So that what you were looking for?
Absolutely. Okay. Just kind of a historical background of how we got to today, and then maybe hearing from Topeka Metro to talk about what they've observed and what they've seen as they've worked with workforce transportation.
Bob Nugent, Topeka Metro. Yeah, the program, as we see it, really doesn't support a fixed route. We have been looking at different alternatives, and we are going to be continuing to look for alternatives through the rest of this year, so we don't leave anybody in the lurch at the end of this year if the service fails to continue. We are looking at things like van pool, more focused on employers specific and not so much on the community. So to try to get that transportation directly to the employers instead of more to the community. We started that conversation with a van pool provider at the end of last year. In the spring, we were starting to ramp that up. Well, as happened with our bike share program and other things, we found ways out. We thought we had a van pool provider that could come in, but van pooling with COVID has run into the same problem we've all run into, and it's everything is kind of stalled. So I have reached back out to the one contractor here over the last couple of weeks since we've had just more discussions with the partnership, and we're starting those conversations again. So hopefully that will be one of the options we can look at. I think what we really decided, or what we really came to in discussion with the partnership, was that we don't have the answer yet. And we need to keep looking for an answer to provide that kind of service and that kind of access to employment, especially like in the SODO and NETO area.
Are there questions about the Topeka Metro or some of the workforce transportation statistics that are being provided? Can you talk to us a little bit about the statistics that are up? It seems like it is ebbing and flowing, but it is still being used by quite a few people, even into the second quarter of 2020 for both initiatives.
Yeah, the ridership is remaining fairly consistent. But one of the problems we are having right now is when we started this program, there's no real contract between the employers and the provider. What we have seen is some employers have not been paying the bills. So right now, Topeka Metro is fronting some of the employers about $10,000 that we have invoiced and have not seen funding for. But anyway, the ridership has stayed fairly consistent. I think what we're seeing and what Kevin from Capital Taxi has been saying is the people that tend to be riding the service are the employers. It's more contract kind of employees that are using it, and not so much the permanent employees. And that's understandable too. Contract employees are usually getting paid a little bit less and may not have ready access to the employment site as others. So, Kevin really knows the ridership a lot better than I do. I think he could speak to these numbers way better than I could.
Now, in going through the program, are there notices going out to the ridership that this may be a program that could come to an end?
We're not yet. I think Kevin has been having some conversations with his drivers and some of the passengers. And really, we don't. I think partnership and all of us involved in this effort are looking for another option. I know Topeka Metro kind of stepped up and filled the role of being kind of the administrator, really providing the service. Capital Taxi is. And we're kind of doing the bookkeeping on the back side of it. I just don't see how we can completely walk away from a service without giving somebody some kind of option. I think that's what we'll do over the next few months, to try to find another possible answer to it.
Mayor Del Isola?
Thank you very much. Could I ask you just to know, what is the ridership that you have per month in your buses in any route, for example?
It varies. Routes like, I was just looking at it today, Route 3 probably has fairly low ridership. Then you have like the California, which has some pretty high ridership at times.
What are those numbers, more or less?
Right off the top of my head, I couldn't give you those numbers.
Okay, and the reason that I'm asking that is just, I'm a numbers person. So according to these numbers, 1638, you divide that by 3 months, gives you 543 rides a month. That's a lot of people. And let's say that we divide that by 2. So that means that in a month, you have 271 individual rides if that person is doing 2 rides. So for me to hear that there is not a capacity, it's kind of concerning, because that's a large number of people utilizing this service.
Yeah. But right now it's being handled by a taxi cab company and the automobile. So once you get to that certain level, which is usually in fixed route transportation is about 8 passengers per hour, what you're looking at. We're not at 8 passengers per hour.
So talk to us a little bit about why a fixed route would not work. Is it because of the hours that people are working? They go to work and they come home, so it's not on a set schedule? What are we seeing in the industry?
Well, that's part of it. We're operating right now from 6 to 6, pretty much, just about 12 hours a day. There's a lot of trips that are going out there after those hours. So that's part of the ridership you're seeing. Those are the hours that are really expensive to operate. Typically, if you look at, say if you had 100 passengers on a weekday, on a Wednesday, Saturday you'd have about 50. On a Sunday you'd have about 25. You start getting later at night, it gets less than that 25 passengers. So it really starts going down. And you can understand, second and third shift, there's not as many second and third shifts out there. Not as many people traveling to go to get their hair done and get groceries at those hours. So ridership is really down. It means your cost of operation kind of goes through the roof.
So if we're looking at the sheets and we look at the statistics and we see that this is a ridership that's using on both initiatives, for South Topeka and North Topeka, and we see that it doesn't meet the qualifications for a fixed route, and you can give an information that the Capital City Taxi they want to change their business model, so that would go away. As a leader in your industry, what is the other opportunities for workforce transportation?
Well, Kevin and Capital City is changing their model. They're going to go away from a 24/7 operation, which also that kind of supports the same theory that I was suggesting, and that is those late night hours are very costly, even for a taxi cab provider. There are other options out there. Van pooling is one of those. Van pooling, if you don't know, is pretty much an employer-driven kind of service. Employers, instead of underwriting the cost of individual trips, can underwrite the cost of a van pool. It gives them much more of a workforce recruitment area, because they can recruit not just within the city of Topeka, within the surrounding areas. that is probably our best option at this point. Other options is probably going to go to other taxi cab providers in the community, continue to do what Capital is probably going to cease doing.
When we talk about van pooling as another alternative, is this driven by the employers or is it driven by the community, such as the bus services?
Van pooling is done in a number of different ways. Back traditionally, 20, 30 years ago when van pooling first started, it was started by metropolitan planning organizations like the local MPO here. They did a lot of van pooling because it was much more of a regional kind of a transportation. It has filtered into like Kansas City Area Transportation Authority. Kansas City has a van pool program. In places I worked in Tennessee and Ohio and Kentucky, they had statewide van pool programs. The state here does not have a van pool program. KDOT, I think the state does have one, but it's for administrative, it's not for general public. But what has happened, at one time there was an independent company that would run van pools. So they would come into a city and they would lease vehicles out to businesses and to organizations like Metro and run those vans. Actually, it's Enterprise Rent-A-Car has a commuting option now, and that's the people I'm talking to. But they will work with a number of different organizations. They will work directly with employers. They like to work with organizations like Metro. It helps us also for Metro because the ridership that we would get, we could get the ridership accounting to us for our federal funding, so that would help us in getting possibly some more funding that way. So it could be worked a number of ways. We're actually looking to bring the van pool program in under contract to Metro to provide a service to employers and to anybody in the public that would.
Are there other questions for Topeka Metro? Councilmember Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on Commissioner Cook's questions about the options, and you've said that there's been a number of discussions. How have those discussions progressed? You see that before the end of the year, possibly before the end of the current operation, there would be a viable option that you could bring to JEDO that we could look at? Because it's obvious that current ridership provides vital transportation to people in the southern part of our community, and that ridership, in my opinion, will only grow as we continue to bring in other industries, with Walmart coming in and so forth, the creation of new jobs there. So it's important to me to plan ahead for the future, and rather than wait till that need gets to be even more so than we haven't thought of. So I'm pleased to hear that you're having conversations, but I would like to hear is, in the interim, until that happens, that there's some plan or thought being given to funding for the Netto and SOTO programs to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks, so that at the end of one program, until we get to another program, there are people left without an opportunity to get into viable jobs. And it's disconcerting to me that employers who rely upon, to some degree, the availability of reliable workforce aren't being more supportive of the program. I think, for me, I think it's important to bring those conversations to those employers in a collaborative way, show how obviously their company benefits from having reliable employees, and how for us as a city we're able to provide that for our citizens and give them stable jobs so that they can then maybe eventually down the road may not even have the need for SOTO or Netto, but that's because they've been able to keep the job on a regular basis. So it's more of a statement than a question, but it comes right down to, if our current model can't be sustained as it is, I would like to hear if there's that thought given to what do we do in the interim. because I'm prepared to make a recommendation and ask for commitment of funds so that we can have that stopgap measure and really bring to focus a task force, if you will, bring all those parties to the table at the same time so we hear conversations about what is possible. Because I know the industry can come up with an option that's workable. It's just not feasible for me to believe that with all the professionals that are involved in these conversations that we haven't been able to find a solution to our need here in our community.
And bridging off of that, I'm going to call on Barbara Stapleton. Barbara has been working as the liaison with Go Topeka, the Topeka Metro and Capital City Taxi and the employers on workforce transportation. Barbara, having served on JEDO for a number of years with my other members, this was started as a pilot project where the first year was completely funded by JEDO, and then it was to transition to where the employers were to be supporting it, and then it would not be supported by the taxpayers, but it would be supported by the employers that were receiving the employees. What has happened?
Community interest, concerns, I think, understandably, on behalf of JEDO members wanting to make sure that there are workforce transportation initiatives in the community. You can see from the slide, if you can see the slide, sorry, it's hard to put a lot of information on that, but we did end up with a third year of funding for SODO to carry it over, to bridge that gap as we had these conversations. Some of the things that we're seeing is that some employers, and you've heard me say this before, and I will share from employers word for word what they have sent to us on their behalf, but that it's the cost of doing business. Other employers will say what I think Bob mentioned, that Kevin mentioned, or maybe Molly did, that many of the riders are those short-term or temporary positions. So there's this no man's land almost where our businesses are saying these are not our employees, so that's why there's a confusion in terms of whose responsibility that employer portion is when the temporary agency is not allocating funding for that type of ridership. We're seeing a lot of those types of things in those comments. As we have mentioned already, we have conducted a survey. We ran that survey a little bit longer, so I actually just got that information this afternoon. And from that survey, and there's several questions, and I'm happy to share all of it with you, but one of you asked a question, and I thought this was kind of telling, and going further to the end. I think the question that I saw was that, there was a yes or no question, now I'm not seeing the copy of it, but they were saying that workforce transportation was not their number one issue, and I thought that was kind of telling. We did have employers, we had 13 responses total. We sent it out to over 45 people. They indicated that it was a collaborative effort. They appreciated that it did provide that other option, that it was a new way for employees who were just getting back on their feet. But they were hoping for a lower cost, which is awfully difficult. That's one thing I don't think Molly mentioned, but Kevin indicated that his cost per ride has continued to increase over these last 3 years, and yet this has remained constant. And so it's not sustainable long term in terms of the way that it's fully set up, because as you mentioned, Commissioner, it was a pilot. That's just some of the overarching things that we see related to the responses that we got. This was the question. As an employer, is transportation the biggest barrier you see for your workforce and talent pipeline? 80% responded no. 20% responded yes. So they do see that it is a concern, but it is not their number one concern right now. And that's not to reflect poorly on any employers that have responded. It's just not where their concerns are right now in terms of skills that they're needing and those types of things. If I may, unless you'd like me to, I'll go ahead and share what two of our employers have submitted to us to share with you this evening on their behalf. Karen Barrett is the Human Resources Director for Resource Fine Foods in Topeka, Kansas, and they have participated in NEDO since its inception. Our 4 plants and distribution centers are located in a 5-mile radius and run 3 shifts daily. We have a significant number of employees who do not own cars and use public transportation. However, the bus is available to our first shift, both arriving and departing the plant, but only available to our second shift arriving and only available to our third shift departing. We have a significant gap for a number of employees. Since the NEDO trial began, research staff have frequently used the $5 ride. We promote the $5 ride to our new employees working the second or third shift. If this option goes away, managers and supervisors believe it will seriously impact our ability to retain existing employees as well as hire new employees for the second and third shifts. We fully support this moving forward, and you have the backing of our vice presidential leadership. We urge that this program continue, and Resource Fine Foods will support its share financially. Thank you. The other message that I have is from Brian Holmes, Senior Manager of Human Resources Target. At our site, we felt that the pilot program was a benefit to our team members. One of the biggest advantages is that it opened up the community to our site as an employment option where they otherwise may not have been able to consider us due to a lack of transportation. In general, this is a net positive for both the community and our business because it allows for better placement of talent with specific jobs. It broadens the ability for certain locations within the city to gain access to employment with companies they otherwise may not have had access to. And it spreads out employment across a broader area, and it offered consistent routes for providers. We found a number of high-performing TMs, I think those are team members, who shared that they were able to gain access to compensation that wasn't otherwise available prior to having access to the Ride to Work program. If a similar version of this program was to be offered, we would have incentive to participate in that program because of the experience with the pilot program. As long as it falls within a reasonable rate and offered similar reliability, we would certainly support this moving forward. I have also requested, and I did want to let you know, that Kevin Moten with Capital City Taxi did indicate he was not able to get off, and he sent his regrets. He is verifying that ridership number that you were asking about, the breakdown, because a lot of that can be duplicate ridership so that we can get an accurate, say if all of us in the room produce those rides or if that many individuals produce those rides. So he should have that for me probably, he said 10 minutes, and that was at 7:07, so any minute. Those are the 2 comments that I have from employers.
Councilmember Padilla.
Thank you, Chair. Barbara, has a survey been conducted of the ridership, what their feedback is about their participation in the program?
That is the hard thing because we don't have that individual record level data. Capital City Taxi does. We had requested when we sent the survey out, it was designed so that it could collect data not only from employers, others in the community, as well as employees that were riding. We asked for it to be shared with that ridership. We don't have necessarily a response. It looks like maybe 1 or 2 that may have responded that way. So we didn't get a lot of response back from the riders themselves, no. But we did try to seek that out.
Thank you.
Councilmember Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Ms. Stapleton, I guess this is not directed to you, but I guess I'm always frustrated because the numbers we see, it's so hard to parse, a quarter. And in my mind, I don't know if, because, just trying to do some longhand division, I probably should have used this phone to do it, but, I did it by hand, and I'm seeing and of course I realize Q2 is down, even Q1 would be affected by COVID. I can't hardly see 2020 over here. But, in Q2, you're talking about 11 people a day for SODO, 18 people a day for NEDO, depending on, and you got to think, they're not using it for first and second shift. Well, they are. There's not a bus route out to SODO, I guess. But, especially with NEDO, that's just basically probably 1 shift mainly, right?
Potentially. Okay.
And then you get down, and is this every time a person, so is one person making a to and from, does that count as 2 rides? And I guess it does. So you might be talking about 9 people here.
That's exactly right. And Kevin just texted me. Just in August, the SOTO clients are 31 and the Netto clients are 69.
So 69 discrete, 69
Individual.
different people.
Individuals, yes.
I mean, because, sometimes when we're talking these numbers, sometimes it's almost like you could almost buy everyone a car at some point, or some sort of transportation. And when you start talking about, these hundreds of thousands of dollars on so few people for a solution, so, man, I guess kind of to maybe echo what Mr. Padilla was thinking, I think we got 3 months to figure this out, and let's all sit down and figure, but we really need the data of how many discrete people, because, if it's 100 different people taking a ride, that's a much different problem than if there's 10 people who are each taking 10 rides.
He says that's pretty reflective of what it looks like from month to month. And of course, like you've indicated, this year has been different related to the pandemic, but you didn't see, a huge drop from quarter 1 to quarter 2.
Right, but we have to assume, things are going to get back. I really do think, hoping my kids are in school full time next semester, and they do too, frankly. I think with all the money, I think with all the money the federal government's throwing at COVID, there's going to be a cure here pretty soon, a vaccine in the next few months. So we have to assume it's probably going to be up to normal. I guess I wouldn't read too much into what August was, because we really need to plan on what it was before the pandemic, in my opinion. I'm willing to meet, and any little expertise I can, which is not much. But like I said, I really think we need to have the statistics, the individual ridership statistics, how many discrete individuals. Thank you.
Other questions for Barbara? Councilmember Padilla, you were getting ready to make a motion.
I am, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Your motion?
My motion is to provide funding to continue the Workforce Transportation Program, currently known as NETO and SOTO, in the amount of $100,000 per year for the next 5 years.
I'm willing to second it for the purpose of discussion, so that we can have further discussion on this item. Opening up to discussion.
Councilman Padilla, is that $100,000? That means it is $20,000 per year?
$100,000 each year for the next 5 years.
Now, Barbara, we are already secured for funding for NATO for 2021 already.
No, we are not.
No. Okay, so its funding would have ended with 2021?
Yes, SOTO is over a year what they should have been. With them being pilots, we had done a phase 1 and phase 2, and then we somehow migrated into a phase 3 with SOTO earlier this year, kind of to try and fill this gap and figure out where we were.
Now, the $100,000 per year, help me do the math here, because if you're looking at $100,000 per year for these 2 routes, where already, even for the 2020 year, you were looking at a total of $80,000 or $82,000. If I'm reading the top line, $40,000 for SOTO, $42,000 for NATO. What are we going to get from that result? Is the van, are you wanting to look at having this transition from Topeka Metro to Capital City Taxi to a van service, having a task force group? What are you looking for?
My intent, Mr. Chair, is to provide the funding to continue the program, but ask that a task force be convened so that at the, hopefully at the beginning of the year, at the very latest, options will have been brought to this board that could, in fact, provide a better and more efficient program and maybe I might amend my motion to up to, so that if we find a better way of doing this, that we don't necessarily have to spend the entire amount. But I just want an incentive to bring the collaborative parties together to come up with another solution.
Now, is this for workforce initiative only, or workforce transportation initially, I mean, just that alone, or is it to these two specific programs? So if we could find that there is a need for ridership to Goodyear, or if we find a ridership that is not necessary to a facility, or that there is now a need with ridership to Walmart once Walmart starts, which would be outside of SOTO, is there going to be a flexibility, or is this $100,000 for workforce transportation to be defined at a later date?
I would accept that definition. I think it makes it a better amendment, so that way it can be utilized in the most effective way.
So it would be then your motion is $100,000 for 5 years for workforce transportation, with that term being left rather open.
Correct, in that SOTO and NETO would fall within that definition of workforce transportation.
But not necessarily specifically a set amount for either ridership.
Correct.
Mayor Del Isla?
You know, and as I've been thinking about this and that amount of money, and the one thing that I'm thinking is, this is an organization that focuses on entrepreneurial innovation. And if we are seeing that there is a hole in the market and we don't have partners, what a great way to talk to people to say, if you like to drive and you want to start a business that is your own Topeka, tuber, or, whatever we want to say, what a great way for you to start looking at it, especially if there's going to be funds allocated for something like this, that would help somebody start their own business and be able to do this transportation work. So I think that there's a lot of alternatives out there. I just don't want to, I want to make sure that as we're talking about this, that we also consider the fact that this could be a great supplier diversity type deal in which we could start a company here in this community to support this gap. So for anybody that's listening, there's a gap in the community for transportation in the third shift. And that's powerful. Because I was doing math here, and if you were to pay somebody $50,000 a year, rough, counting everything, and then add $10,000 for a car, and it's only 10 or 19 rides, it's absolutely doable. So just some thought. But thank you for that clarification.
Are there other comments regarding the motion? Commissioner Mays?
So I've been pretty supportive of this program, I believe, for the last several years that I've been a part of JEDO. I feel like there's a lot of variables that we're talking about right here, that we've got the provider of the transportation is saying that next year they may not be able to provide the transportation. We've got the administrator of the program saying they're not sure that they're going to be able to be the administrator of the program any longer. And this is all next year, 2021. So I don't think that providing, $100,000 for 5 years is necessarily the right thing to do in this case, when there's so many things that we just don't know. And not to mention, it's an increase in the current funding already. And as we can see by these numbers, the ridership's going down. I don't know that that's the right approach. I mean, I might support one more year, but as was mentioned before, we've got to figure this thing out. And just throwing money at it, I don't think is the solution. We've got to be creative and come up with solutions and not just, fund it. I mean, we can fund it, but it's got to make sense to fund it.
I think that, that is a good point. You make some very good points that throwing money at something doesn't fix the problem. But the models are changing, which is why I was hopeful with the phrasing of workforce transportation, that that would be broad enough that we would be able to anticipate what is the need for Topeka ridership. If it's not the Topeka Metro and it's not Capital City Taxi, what is it? And how do we get these employees to work? Especially when you consider $100,000 out of a $5 million budget is a relatively small amount. And that, $5 million is set aside to go to Topeka every year for economic development. And part of that should be for our getting the employees to work, especially where we have a need for employees in our companies.
And not only that, it's not 100, it's up to.
Up
So
to.
if we don't get to it, it's not expended, and it just goes back to the funds for other issues.
So, Commissioner Mays, is it your request that there be an amendment to the motion from 5 years to 1 year, up to 100,000?
I would move that amendment.
Commissioner or Councilmember Padilla, would you accept that amendment?
accept it.
Somebody would have to second that amendment. He didn't have to.
It needs a second.
All right. Is there a second? Mayor Del Isla, would you second that? Okay. So the motion then that we are discussing is that we would be setting aside for the 2021 budget $100,000 up to $100,000 for workforce transportation, and that there would be a task force set aside to develop how that transportation initiative would work. Okay. Is there further discussion on this motion? Councilmember Duncan.
Is my mic on? Ooh, there we go. Just two quick comments. I was going to say, before it was, even when it was 5 years down to 1 year, just two quick. First, I think there's prudence just in putting that money aside at this time so that it's designated for that purpose as we have those conversations. The second thing is I look at those numbers and do some quick math myself. I know some people look at those and it's hard to tell with COVID when you see declines what that means, but I will point out that even that small number of people account for $3 million, about, give or take, in wages. So that $100,000 investment allowed those folks to bring generate $3 million in wages, and I don't think you can overlook what that impact is back into the city of Topeka. So just want to make those two comments. Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Emerson.
Not a discussion, but I just want to apologize to Mrs. Stapleton. My anger was not directed at you. I'm just getting frustrated with this because it just seems like such a simple thing we should be able to fix, and it's so damn tough to come up with an all-encompassing solution. So I apologize.
Thank you. I didn't take it personally.
Any other discussion? So on this, again, I'm going to call for a vote, and I'm going to do this by roll call instead of a voice vote. Madam Clerk, if you can read.
Commissioner Rippon?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Mays?
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Emerson?
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Shows that it passes. Thank you. Our next item.
Item 5C, housing discussion.
This was an item that we had initially set aside to discuss earlier in the year, and then COVID hit. At this time, since we are still in the pandemic, I don't believe that it's prudent for us to have this discussion. I would move that we defer action on or discussion of this item and set it over to the December 9th meeting. So we would have a maybe healthier discussion. Again, we were looking at partnering with the city of Topeka. The city of Topeka was looking at their housing initiative. A lot of things have been put on hold or set aside until we know a little bit better how COVID is affecting our community. So that is a motion to defer into the December 9th meeting.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cook, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Shows that it passes. Our next item.
Item 6, public comment.
I show that there are 2 speakers signed up for public comment. The first is Mr. Ahrens.
Good evening. My name is Antone Arens, and I'm a member of Trinity Presbyterian Church and a member of Topeka Jump. First of all, thank you for your recent vote to support 2% of the JEDO budget to go for workforce development for 1 year. That's good. But we need constant money for workforce development every year in the JEDO budget, with innovation every year for that to continue. Not just for 2021, because we're talking about Topekans, people who live and work here and need to get to work. We all know they do, and we all know that some of them don't have ways to get to work. In our meetings with each of you, you've told us stories about the people you know who don't have ways to get to work. And that should inform us. Since we, Topeka Jump, first went to Topeka Metro in 2017 asking for a solution to the workforce transportation problem in South Topeka, these programs, SOTO and NETO, were born. That is awesome. And we want momentum from that good start that we've had. 35,000 plus rides since 2018. You can't say there is no need. It's more than a pilot. It's proven that people need a way to work. And that's what this program is giving. I want to draw your attention to just a small amount of what I brought up, a stack of postcards that we let you see a few years back, 2018, of people who support workforce transportation in Topeka. I've got a whole nother stack at least this big. And most recently, we've got 1,200 more people that have signed a petition, a virtual petition, which you have, that shows their support for workforce transportation in Topeka. This public-private partnership is mightily important and needs to continue from 2021 and beyond. You've heard from Barbara Stapleton that both Research and Target value this program, because when we've gone to talk to the people at Target, they've told us how much money it saves them in retraining employees. Why? Because they can get to work and get to work reliably. We're going to urge you to continue to think about workforce transportation as a small 2%, mind you, 2% of the $5 million that my tax money goes to and all these other people. 2%. I don't think that's too much to spend on transportation. And while I end tonight, I want to make sure that I could share a testimony video that I have with me on a zip drive. I don't know what kind of, is there any way I can plug it in anywhere here?
Mark's coming up right behind you.
That's great.
Antone?
I've got a testimony video from one of the riders.
Is there a motion to extend time?
I move to extend for another 4 minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Mayor Del Isla. All in favor, say aye.
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 Shows that it passes for an extension of time.
Technology.
My name is Brian Chris. I've been working at Target for a year, and this is one of the ways that I've been getting to and from work. It's actually a good lifesaver. I don't have transportation, family members, or even license at this point in time, so this is definitely one of the major things that's been helping me get to work.
Awesome. Well, and what would happen if this program went away?
I wouldn't be able to get to warehouse. I'd lose my job.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this also, I think, has been emailed to you. Maybe you'll be able to hear it a little better in the email, along with the petition.
Thank you very much. Our other speaker for tonight for public comment is Lazone Grace.
Good evening, members of the JEDO. I'm not sure, did you receive the email attachments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Gosh, I wish we had that type of support for a workforce broadband initiative at have for a workforce transportation initiative. But considering what I had shared with you in the attachments, it's not any secret that I've come and spoke about the digital divide probably a decade or more. The good news is what I've shared there is something that had developed that we were able to take federal provision and get our state, Kansas Department of Children and Families, who will now purchase hotspots for those TANF job seekers, as well as those who are receiving food assistance, and they will be paying for the full year of service. What I shared with Mr. Pravarnik is one of the hotspots, 4G, unlimited, no throttle, no caps, and first I want to be able to I would like to thank Mrs. Ann Ma because she was just as passionate about this. I shared the information with her. She took the information to the hierarchy within DCF. They listened, and they found that that was very, it's something that they would do. I met with the key staff this morning, and we will be presenting and rolling out at least by the beginning of next month for Topeka. If things work out, this is something that's going to be statewide. I have been trying to find a solution to this or some type of alternative. This is not a cure, but it is a good alternative. So I just wanted to sort of share some good news. I had read the article in Sunday's newspaper, and it seems like people are still up in the air on what should we do. This does not replace a real robust broadband infrastructure, but I don't have to sell the problems of the digital divide anymore. I don't have to speak to it and how bad it is. The COVID speaks for itself. So I just wanted to share this information with you all because you represent both the city and the county, that you know that there is something you know that is positive out here that's dealing with this particular issue. Part of the handout, especially on the front sheet, on the digital inclusion is not just the internet access and the computer devices, but it's also the digital literacy. And not just is DCF willing to pay for the internet service, they're also willing to pay for a computer system if the individuals don't have it. People on TANF and cash assistance, they still have to be looking for work. During the COVID, business shut down, school shut down, government shut down, but the 24-month clock on them did not stop. So a year is almost wiped out for them. So it's good that they have some type of a resource. If a lot of jobs are available, you need to apply online, this is going to give them a chance and this is going to give them some hope. I did circle on one of the pages in a green marker there. This is where an area that is not going to be met by DCF, and that deals with the digital literacy training. And what I had marked, digital equity plan, digital coalition, and a digital equity fund. This is the 5th time I've come to the JEDO, and I'm going to ask that you look at and do these things. They really don't cost you any money, but it does put some type of a policy or framework in place so that as we move forward, that if there's monies to be spent or whatever, that there's some type of a framework, because just providing internet access and a computer is not the end all. So I would like to, I don't know who I would need to speak with for you to really consider those 3 things. It's not going to take $100,000 to create a fund at the Topeka Community Foundation to establish a digital inclusion fund, a fund which then could be used for other companies who may want to add contributions to it, that can fund the type of digital literacy classes that need to take place in different parts of the city. I would like you to consider that, go to Topeka to consider it. I just wanted to share some good news with you. There is one extra piece that I hope to be able to pull to the table tomorrow. I'm not going to mention it now, and thanks to Michelle Stubblefield making the connection. I hope that that will become a part of the menu that is going to make this even a more exciting opportunity for those people who really need some type of access, whether it's for entrepreneurship, but mostly it's for them to be going online, looking for work, and being successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lazon. Is there any other comment from the public or from the membership? Seeing none, item 7 is a reminder that our next meeting is December the 9th, 2020. Is there any other business to come before the board? And seeing none, we are adjourned.